This is going to be an interesting experience. Let's see what we can uncover in this little series. I guess this could be a series.
Yes, I think it could be. It's got all the makings of a series.
Yeah.
You have a lot of music, and we're gonna dig into a couple of songs tonight and see where it leads us.
Starting all the way at the beginning, I suppose, really. I mean, as far as I remember, I had started playing guitar. I was playing for maybe 6, 7, maybe 8 months, something like that. And I was really into my dad's music initially and whatever I was hearing on the radio around that time because I was 12. Prior to that, I really only heard what my dad was listening to or working on at home. We didn't listen to the radio. I wasn't around people that were playing, let's call it popular music. It was just whatever was on at home. So I, at 12 years old, I started to hear other music other than my dad's music. I always liked my dad's guitar playing. I liked watching him play guitar. I liked the look of the instruments. And in particular, I loved the SG when my dad was playing the SG because it reminded me of Batman. It has those horns, you know. And so I started playing guitar and I was hearing music for the first time that was not my dad's music because I started to have friends that were listening to music and they were listening to the radio. And what was popular on the radio at the time was Ozzy Osbourne, who had Randy Rhoads playing with him at that time, and Van Halen and The Who and AC/DC, and you know, I started hearing the Beatles and all these other things. But prior to that, I really only heard what my dad was working on at home or what he might have been listening to from his record collection. And that was pretty varied. I mean, it was a lot of classical musicians or folk music. Sometimes there were rock records in there. I remember hearing Black Sabbath and Jimi Hendrix and Queen from my dad's record collection. So I was starting to hear things that were interesting to me, but I really didn't know that much about music. I just liked that it seemed like something really creative and fun and interesting, and it was cool to watch and listen to. So when I started to really get into playing guitar, uh, I needed a little bit of a push to figure out how to do what I wanted to do. And my dad set up a few lessons for me with his guitar player at the time, who was Steve Vai. And Steve was about, I think, 20 years old at that time, maybe 21. And he sat down and he had this notebook that he made where he wrote down some exercises. And if you don't play guitar, there's ways that you can learn to play guitar without reading music. You can sort of look at neck diagrams and you can count where the frets are and go, oh, okay, put a dot here and a dot here and dot here. And visually you can see where you can put your fingers. So I never learned to read music. I still can't. I can read it just barely, but it's so much faster for me to just listen to something and learn it by ear. So back in the day, this notebook was the thing that showed me how to navigate the neck and figure out some stuff. But as Steve likes to say, when I first took my first lesson, he was really petrified to go back and talk to my dad because he thought, oh, there's no way this kid's going to be able to play. He can't even make the connection from his right hand to his left hand, and stuff is just not working out all that well. But then a week later, there was drastic improvement, and a week after that, even more. So it was the kind of thing where I put in a lot of time. I got really excited about it, and I would start playing initially several hours a day, and then it became 8 or 10 or 12 hours a day because I was just obsessed with trying to learn stuff. And at that point, I really got focused on the music of Van Halen because there was something about the guitar sound and what he was playing. It was so focused on the guitar, but it was also, in a way, it reminded me of my dad's music, not because it sounded similar, but because it had this innovation to it. There was something about it, an energy, a sound that was unique that really stood out. And it made me really want to learn what was going on with that. So I did my best to just kind of sit there and pick out little bits and pieces. But having only played for 6 or 7 or 8 months, I wasn't learning a lot of stuff all that easily, because at that time there was no visual reference. Now you can go on YouTube and you can see a video of how somebody plays something, and chances are it's going to be fairly accurate to the way somebody might go ahead and play that. But on the guitar, again, if you've never played the guitar, what you have is multiple areas where you can play the same note, and it will sound differently in all these different places. You can have an open string, or you can put your finger on a fret and make the same note, and it can be played in all these different places. So trying to figure out how somebody plays something and make it so that your hands are in the right place and that you get the right feel and the execution of the idea, that really was something that you had to experiment with. You had to listen to records, move the needle back, or rewind the tape, or all these things. So it was hours of tedious little things, and then experimenting, trying to find where those notes were. And that's what I was doing. But one day, out of nowhere, we got a call to our house that there was a guy purporting to be Edward Van Halen. So this to me was incredible, because I was listening to so much Van Halen, and I thought, how could this be? I mean, this is like a magic trick. If this guy actually is Eddie Van Halen, what are the chances that this would happen? And my dad ended up getting on the phone with him, and about 15 or 20 minutes later, he was at the house, and he brought a guitar with him, and I was able to see him play up close and see him play things like Eruption, the intro to Mean Street, and all these other crazy things that I had been trying to imagine how he was doing it, but there it was. So I was laser focused on being able to see exactly how he played some of these things. And that made a huge difference in my progression as a guitar player pretty much overnight, because I was able to see it and see, okay, how challenging is it for him? How is he going for these things? And for him, it was really easy. Obviously, over the years, I learned how to do it, and I was able to get close to playing things the way that Edward did, and get close to the sound and the feel and all those things. But it was really a lifetime's worth of inspiration to keep following that path, along with all the other musical interests that I've had. But that was a really crazy way to start. I before really getting into guitar, I was really into playing baseball, and I was playing Little League baseball, and our team was pretty good. We went to a bunch of finals. We were going to go to the Little League World Series, but we got knocked out before we got to that final round. But I had pitched a no-hitter and was really, really into baseball. I used to have a thing that was set up in the backyard. There was a giant railroad tie that was put into the ground, and on one end, on the other side of it, there was a basketball hoop. But on the back side of it, we put a bucket that was from some kind of I don't know what was in it, something to mix up something for construction, and it was nailed to the backside of this railroad post, and it was at the right level for throwing a baseball to be a strike. So on either side, this is the width of this post, and then there's a bucket that's just nailed into that thing at strike level. But on either side is vast open space. So if you don't throw it in the bucket, you're throwing a ball into the bushes that you have to go retrieve.
The worst kind of ball.
Yeah, I would sit in the backyard and I would throw baseballs into the bucket, and it would hit in the center, and then it would bounce back to me. So if I could throw it into the bucket and have it bounce back, I could do that, for hours at a time. And I was able to practice throwing strikes that way. And at the occasional times when I would miss it, I'd have to go get it. And if you're missing it a lot, it's not really that fun. So you have to
Right.
try to get good at throwing it in there and have it bounce back. Um, but I remember thinking in that kind of way, like, okay, if I can hone in on something that I can focus on so much, that's a physical activity where I can throw it and pick a certain spot and make that ball, I can use my force of will to make that ball go where I want. I should be able to do that with the guitar. And so I had that same kind of focus and drive, listening to things. And it wasn't just about learning the notes, it was about trying to figure out how to get the sound and all the textures. So my whole life, that's been my approach, is to really kind of focus in on something really specific so that I could do what I was hearing in my head.
The with the exposure, your dad didn't push music on you guys, though. I don't believe, right? It was just it was in the
Well,
house, and he
he
supported
didn't
it.
say, okay, hey, everybody, here's a great idea. You should become musicians. You know, he didn't
Right.
do anything like
Right.
that. If we showed some sort of interest, he might give us some areas to discover some things or learn about stuff. And so I got to spend a lot of time with him in the studio. And even when he was on tour, as I got older, I went on tour a few times and played with him in different locations. But it was always really fascinating to me to watch him work and see how he came up with ideas and how fast he was able to do that stuff and how easily he could communicate his ideas to everyone else, specifically because he could write it on the page and give it to them and they were expected to be able to read it and play it, even if it was hard as hell. So he found people that could do that, and that was a big challenge because it's not easy to keep a band together even when it's just four guys that grew up together.
Right.
So off and on, there would be a revolving door of people in and out of the band that were people that had the requisite skills to be able to learn to sight read this stuff or play it. But the challenge always is, do those people have an attitude that's easy to get along with
Right.
during recording sessions or on a tour bus or backstage? And that's usually where things always fall apart. You might have people that have really good musical skill, but socially, they're not people that you want to spend time with. Dad didn't specifically say, okay, I'm going to teach you how to do all this stuff. If I had really specific questions, he would answer them for me, but there was never a time where he did the, okay, I'm going to take you under my wing and let's do it like this. It wasn't like, okay, I make shoes and I'm going to show you how to do it, you know?
Yep.
But in a way, it kind of is, because it was a family business in that sense. My dad made music, and there was a tradition, a kind of a way that he did it that I paid attention to. And I was able to, over a period of time, gather enough information to be able to reproduce the elements that give it that same texture and personality and feel. And that's a pretty tall order. It's a big ask to be able to do that when you're talking about the music of Frank Zappa. It's pretty intense music. And initially, when I got really into playing music, I was inspired by my dad's music, but I always knew in the back of my mind that you really had to know a lot about music in order to be able to play it, to play his music. So I thought, well, one day I'll get to that. But in the meantime, I'm just going to learn a bunch of guitar stuff and see where that takes me. And over the years, I've done a lot of different things. And I would say that if I were to listen back to all of the things that I've done, there's definitely progressions that you can hear. The records don't really sound anything alike. And my dad's drastically don't sound anything alike. But the progression of my music went from kind of a real rock oriented feel to being exposed to more other influences over time. So if you were to hear Having a Bad Day and compare it to Via Zamata, it's very drastically different. And there's years of experience in between those records. So clearly that would be one of the reasons why it would be so different. But in the 14 plus, I guess it was about 14 years straight that I did the touring of my dad's music before COVID stopped everything. What I learned in that process was much more about how people play together and how music is constructed in the classical sense. If you're going to be composing music for an orchestra, for example, everybody's got a role to play. It's different than a band, because a band, you could have a three-piece and you could cover a lot of ground, but an orchestra, there's so many more colors and textures, and the stuff can all kind of interweave, and there's counterpoint and contrary motion and all this kind of stuff happening, that I started to become interested in that over a period of time, because really that's what my dad was. He was a classical composer who mainly used a rock band as his orchestra. And he started by going to the library at 11 years old and teaching himself how to notate music. He used to just draw it without having any idea what it would sound like. He just would make shapes and stuff. And so, because I don't read and write music in that way, I do a similar thing, but I do it on a computer, where I'll actually just draw shapes on a computer, because you can open up a MIDI file, which is basically, for people that don't know, the computer can have invisible or silent notes, let's say, that can be on the page. You can make them do whatever you want, and then you can attach an instrument to play whatever you just drew, and you can hear it. And after that, you can say, I like this, I don't like this, and you can adjust it. And it's totally malleable and non-destructive. So you can just experiment to your heart's content. And so when I've sat down to write music with an orchestra in mind, that's how I've done it. I've drawn some shapes, because a scale is really just ascending or descending, or you have these step patterns of how you're moving through it. So, you know, if I just drew some different contours, I could hear that stuff and decide if I liked it, and then I could harmonize it, or I could add counterpoint and do different things. And I was able to actually write some music for a 100-piece orchestra that was performed a few years back in Holland. It was the NNO Orchestra in Holland. We played, there was 2 concerts where they performed some of my original classical music, and then some of my dad's classical music, as well as one piece by Steve Vai. So it was 3 Italian composers. And it was a really interesting experience. One that I really actually never thought I would have, but it was a cool thing to be able to do. So at some point soon, I hope to be able to put together a little mix of that concert and be able to release it for people to hear some of that stuff. And I want to be able to do it in Atmos and give the whole surround experience and bring it to life in a different way than just standard stereo. The songs that we ended up recording, I don't know how it ended up that I had the chance to record the songs to begin with. It was just one day my dad said, hey, would you like to record a song or two? And I said, sure, that'd be great. I had a little band together with my friends in school. We were all 12. And, you know, we all had just started playing. So we weren't very skilled at our instruments, but we were excited about the idea that, oh yeah, cool, we can record something. But the icing on the cake there was that somehow or another, my dad had arranged it so that Edward Van Halen was going to produce these songs. And Don Landy, who had recorded all of the Van Halen records, was the engineer for the sessions. So here we are, 12 years old, and we have no idea how to do anything in the studio. And Edward Van Halen is trying to talk to us, but he's not knowing how he should give us guidance, because if we're not really playing that well, he tried his best, you know, to not be negative and say, gosh, you guys are pretty terrible, there's nothing I can do here. he helped get us in the spirit of things, but there was a change that needed to be made where the drummer that was playing with us at the time just wasn't able to play well enough in the studio. So we did end up getting a different drummer to play. And the drummer that ended up playing was the younger brother of Warren Cucurullo, who had once been in my dad's band, who then ended up in Missing Persons and then Duran Duran.
Duran, yep.
Yeah. So his brother was several years older than us. I think he was 18 at the time, and we're all 12. So that helped get the project moving, and the playing sounded a little stronger. But the keyboard player, Greg Kirsten, he's gone on to work with lots of different famous musicians as a producer and a songwriter. He's done cover records where he's performed various versions of Van Halen music that have no guitar. It's all keyboards or other instruments playing Van Halen stuff. So it's interesting to hear Van Halen presented in that way with absolutely no guitar.
I bet you how Eddie thinks sometimes. Oh, Eddie used to think too sometimes, because I know he was big on doing a lot of his music in keyboard.
Well, he definitely wrote some songs on piano, even songs that you wouldn't think were done on or written on piano or keyboards first. I learned only recently that one of my favorite Van Halen songs, which is super guitar, it's perfectly made to be played on guitar, a song called Unchained. Yep. That one, when you learn to play it on guitar, it's so guitaristic. You can't imagine that it would have ever been written on any other instrument, but yet it was written on piano. So that's one of those things that blew my mind, where that song, you would have been able to swear that there's no way that was written on anything other than the guitar, but piano. So anyway, we were in the studio, and none of us had ever learned how to do anything with recording or overdubbing or anything like that. So the band, we knew the songs just well enough to get through and play them, and we didn't have any punch-ins where we had to, as a whole band, have to try to punch in the middle of a performance, play along and then just jump in where that was happening. But when it came to overdubs, that's something that I did have to do. And Edward had to teach me what that process was, where you listen to the part right before you want to punch in and you play along, and then they punch in, get the new part, and then punch out. And so it inserts the new bit that you want to do. But if you're not playing along, it won't have a seamless transition. And so that was tricky because I could barely play at the time anyway. So playing along with what I had already just played wasn't the easiest thing. But that was something when I was doing the solo and other stuff, I would punch in little parts here or there. So the whole process was a real learning experience, because I was working with my favorite guitarist in the world, and he's teaching me about how to punch in and all these other, and how to get the guitar sound to begin with. He set up the mic with Don Landy and tested everything. And he had brought in the Frankenstrat, the red and white striped guitar. And he's like, here, try this one. And it ended up that my guitar ended up sounding better for the part than his guitar. So I didn't end up playing the Frankenstrat, but that was there as an option. So it was just kind of a crazy thing to be seeing that guitar. And I remember very vividly, it was not too long before that he had taken a quarter and he had drilled a screw through it to the body so that it could level out the tremolo bridge. So it was like a recent addition to the guitar at that point. I just remember thinking, oh, that's so cool. He just put a screw through a quarter and it's sitting on the guitar. It's bolted on. All kinds of things that were not with precision. He just like chiseled things by hand and all kinds of stuff. We were recording My Mother's a Space Cadet. The other things that were interesting that happened, there was a point where Don Landy had talked to my mom because he was trying to help get everybody to really feel like there was the right mood in the studio. And so he talked to Ed. They had talked to my mom, and Ed came in. And he said, "Okay, everybody, it's time for a milk and cookie break," which in the history of rock and roll, it's usually not what happens when you take a break in the studio. It's like milk and cookie break is pretty far down the list of things most musicians do when they take a break from the studio. So this was kind of a very wholesome, break that was taken in the studio. But it was kind of funny because, Ed was trying to figure out, how do I relate to these kids? What do I say? And this was just a funny thing for him to come in and say, "All right, let's take a milk and cookie break." And I don't have total vivid memories of all the things. So I don't know if it was a frustrating experience for Ed and Don because we couldn't have been that good. We sound good as the end result, but we'd only been playing for 9 months at the most at that time. But I do remember there were some fun things that we did at the very end of Space Cadet there during the fade out. It's kind of like right after the solo, we had these toy ray guns that had these laser sounds, and we were using them in front of the microphone. And there was a little knob that you could turn and it would change the sound effects. And at one point, I had turned the knob and the noise, it synchronized with the snare fill. So it's like, and the laser just went right with the drum fill. It was like totally not planned, but it ended up being perfectly in time. And so that's this one thing that happens on the record that's completely by accident. But I remember in that moment thinking, how cool is that this little thing happened, and it would probably never ever happen again, but it was captured. And I remember thinking, I've seen this happen when my dad's been recording, where something amazing will happen and people will start laughing, and you'll have captured that, and then the spirit of that is in the recording. And I always loved that because it's, if you didn't have the ability to see, you would still feel everything about the music because you'd be hearing it and you'd feel like you're right there in that moment where something happens spontaneously. And that kind of feeling is so exciting in the studio, and it's rare that it gets to be incorporated into music. It used to happen more frequently, but these days everything is so much to a grid. Everything's trying to be so perfect. It's been dehumanized. So stuff like that doesn't really happen in the studio anymore. And I miss that kind of stuff. So we recorded My Mother's a Space Cadet, which was the single. And it was a tune that really, it came from, there were so many times when we were late to school growing up. My mom would be sitting and reading a magazine or something. We're like, we have to go, we're late. And she would just keep reading, or she would get up and she would put stuff in the dishwasher. We're like, we have to go to school. And we were late a lot because she just seemed to be disconnected to what was happening. So we started calling her a space cadet. And so the song had its connection to that idea, although the lyrics don't reflect that, except for there's one line about, I don't remember the lyrics, but there's one line about her reading her magazine. So that was very specific to that moment. But we had an opportunity to record a second song, which was a ridiculous song called Crunchy Water. So when you're 12 and you're thinking, well, I got to write another song, what should it be called? Crunchy Water. Okay, cool, let's do it. And it was just, you write the lyrics in about 8.4 seconds, and it was just kind of a goofy song. And I don't even remember much about the process because it went so fast. We just put that one together really quickly. That one doesn't have a guitar solo on it, but the first song, My Mother's a Space Cadet, has a guitar solo that even Edward at the time when he was talking about it, he was saying that I sounded a lot like him even at that time when I was only playing for 9 months. So the solo, if you listen to that, it's got quite a Van Halen kind of feel to it. But Edward also does play a couple of parts on the record. He plays the slide guitar intro,
Okay.
and he plays a little melody at the end. After I play the solo, there's a melody that comes in towards the outro that he plays. And he was playing that because it had these unison bends, and my hands weren't strong enough to bend those and consistently keep them in tune because it was just really hard for me to do that. So he played that part. The other thing is it was at the studio that was built at our house, and my dad hadn't even recorded in there yet. So the first couple of things that were recorded were test projects so the bugs could be worked out. So my single was one of the first things recorded in there, really to see what kind of problems were going to happen when you started doing a recording session. And I think not long after that, the first Missing Persons album was recorded there as well. So those were some of the earliest things before my dad started jumping in and using the studio to do all of his work, which the first record he recorded in there was You Are What You Is. So the whole experience of recording those two songs was a complete dream. Me and my friends that we played together and went to school together, you can't even imagine how exciting it was to be able to play music in the studio. Okay, it's one thing that my dad is Frank Zappa and we're playing in Frank Zappa's studio, but then you bring in Edward Van Halen and the guy who recorded the Van Halen records, Don Landy, into the mix. And the first thing that we're ever recording is done in that location and with those people. And Edward wasn't able to have his name put on the record as the producer. They had to come up with a different name that could be used so that there was a producer credit on there. And it was Edward and Don together. The little team that they became was known as Devards. And I never knew what that was. I thought, well, maybe that has something to do with, maybe it's Dutch or I have no idea what it was. But I heard from Don Landy that that name was taken because it was a play on how Edward's mom would say Edward's name. She'd say Edvard. So it was Devards. So that was after 40 years of not knowing what this was. I learned that recently. So that was pretty interesting. But again, the whole experience was just such an amazing thing to be in the studio with all these people, get to have this opportunity to learn about how to record music in that way, have the instruments around that were there, and just it was something that I could never have dreamed up. And nobody at that time even, you know, if you told that story, people would say, oh, get out of here. That didn't happen. But it did. And, you know, even around that same time, I had my little band we played at school, and Edward Van Halen had come to the show that we did. He came to the Soundcheck, and we were playing Running with the Devil at my school, whatever talent show, whatever it was. And that was a whole other thing where the world's most famous guitar player shows up during school hours. He's walking around and asking people where I am. He's trying to find where I am in the auditorium. I don't even know how he ended up coming to that because my parents didn't even come to the Soundcheck. So it was just crazy that Edward Van Halen has arrived in his Porsche and he has walked around to try to find where I was. He came in, he listened to us play, and he said, "Hey, you're playing that wrong." And he came up on stage and he showed me, he stood behind me and he had his arm over the front. So, he was behind with his arm over me playing the guitar while it was strapped to my shoulder. And he played the proper chords and he showed me how to do the right pick slide and all this kind of stuff. So, part of the time that we were playing the song, he was actually the guitar player in the band, and the drummer and the bass player were playing with Edward Van Halen playing "Running with the Devil" with them. So it was this crazy experience there. But even crazier was my guitar wasn't staying in tune. He said, "Hey, I'm gonna go get you a guitar. I'm gonna bring it back." And he lived not far. He was like 15 minutes away. So he drove home, came back with a guitar and said, "Hey, try this one." So I was able to have extra time at the sound check because he had gone and got this guitar. And it was insane that he was able to do that, to come, leave, and then go back and then come back. That is, you would never ever expect anybody to go above and beyond like that. So it was a crazy, crazy experience. And at least I learned how to play "Running with the Devil" properly, and my guitar stayed in tune better. So after I played on that guitar, I called him and said, "Hey, thanks. It stayed in tune better. When do you want to pick it up?" And he said, "Oh no, you can have that guitar." And so I still have that guitar today. It's just one of those crazy things. At 12 years old, it was a whirlwind of all this stuff. And Edward was always an inspiration in a lot of different ways musically, but I could always get a good sense that it meant something to him to be able to connect with people through music. And I don't think it was just, "Hey, let me do this favor," or whatever, because I would see him with just anybody that was a fan of his. He
Mhm.
would always give people the time of day. He was really happy that people liked what he did. It wasn't his motivation. He wasn't doing it to say, "Oh, I want to make stuff that everybody likes." It was definitely something that for him, he followed what he liked. It had a feeling that he was excited about, and it was a bonus that so many people liked his music. I mean, I don't know how many records they've sold at this point, 100 million. It's pretty
Thing.
insane. And what I'm doing is related to people supporting it by either coming to see it or buying it or whatever the case may be. For me, I want to make sure that it's a good experience. So after every show, when we started the main tour that we were doing where I was playing my dad's music, I was most of the time in the beginning staying on stage and shaking hands with people and talking to them and getting some feedback about the show and all these kinds of things every night after every show. I mean, hundreds of shows, maybe, I don't know how many shows we've played in total. I'd have to look it up, but we probably in 14 years played at least 1,400 shows. So it wasn't until the last tour that we weren't going back out into the theater and signing stuff. Um, Basically, the last year of touring, there, I was just getting so tired after a long day. I just needed a break after the show, so we weren't able to go out and do that as we used to do. But the point of me telling that is the experience of being able to deliver something that, if somebody's going to have an escape from their life and do something that is hopefully going to be fun,
Mhm.
we want to deliver on that, and we want to make sure that they have a great time and they want to come back. So it was a no-brainer to mingle with the audience afterwards and say, "Hey, thanks so much for coming." And we got to meet so many nice people who supported us over the years, came to many shows, and a lot of people became our friends that we would just see when we were out there. So it was a great thing to be able to do. But I learned from my experience with having met Edward Van Halen at a young age that you can have an impact on people if you are in the right set of circumstances. You meet somebody, maybe that's the one time you'll ever meet them. It should be a good experience, you know? So that was something that was important.
Well, you've done it. I mean, I don't think anyone would slide you if you didn't do it anymore, especially after COVID now, the meeting and greeting and,
Yeah.
it's, and I'm going to say the other thing is with you when you're touring, you always give extra. You've done the clinics before the show.
Yep.
Just learning your dad's work and putting the show together is not like a normal rock show. It's a huge production. Before you have a lot to learn. I mean, so there's a lot of work involved. Then you do the show, that you do pre-production, then you do your classes and everything. So at the end of that, and then your shows are like what, 2 hours almost sometimes? It's like an hour and a half, 2 hours, right?
Sometimes they're 2.5 hours. A typical day for me would be going into the venue at around 10:30, 11, if we can get in that early. Sometimes the bus will be parked up out front and you can't get in till noon. But if I can get in early, then I can do some exercise or I can take a shower or whatever. We have like maybe once a week a hotel. We're always on the bus, always showering at venues or maybe get a day room. This is not a luxurious, glamorous life. This is okay. Everybody's in a confined tube, going down the highway.
Yeah.
But so my day would typically be anywhere from 10:30 or noon in the venue. But then I might have my guitar clinic that would be at 3 o'clock, then sound check at 5 o'clock, then the show at either 7:30 or 8 o'clock, do 2.5 hour show. And then after the show, we would sign stuff and then start packing up. So I probably wouldn't get out to the bus until at least 12:30 or 1 in the morning. And then I would listen to a bunch of the show to make sure that things were going the way they were supposed to go. So I wouldn't get to bed probably till 3 or 4 in the morning. And then it would just happen again and again. And that's how a typical day was every day on tour. I think a lot of people don't really know what a challenge it can be. And certainly the biggest acts, they have different levels of comfort of how they travel.
Right.
So, if you're trying to say, is this how Beyonce does it? No, she's probably flying on a private jet and all these kinds of things and does maybe 4 shows a week tops. But we do 8 or 9 shows in a row before a day off. And the day off might not even be in a city in a full day. We might have a drive that is
travel day.
12 hours. Yeah. And that's your day off, so it's a grind out there in a lot of ways, but all of us in the band get along well and we enjoy playing the music. So it's not drudgery for us to do that. Whereas a lot of people could find, oh man, I don't want to keep doing this. I'm going to phone this in. But you can't do that with my dad's music. It will bite you immediately. You can't phone it in. You have to be as focused as you can. And that's another reason why, for me, I've always just let the music speak for itself. I haven't done a lot of theatrics, or there's not a lot of crazy things happening. We don't do crazy lighting. We need to be able to see what we're doing and playing the stuff. So it's not like you can just run around and be like Van Halen is on stage playing this music. It's so hard that anything can derail it. And that's why maybe it's not as thrilling to see, but yet it's really there for you to hear, So the music is a super difficult challenge, but we take it very seriously, and we have done for all this time. So it's something that hopefully I'll be able to get back to at some point, but I have a lot of concerts that we filmed over the years, which I plan to be able to edit together and either make a film that documents the whole project from the ground up, or multiple concerts that can come out as streamable events and, hopefully get into an Atmos realm as well. But that's something that I want to get to. I mean, I probably have about, I think 80 or 90 different songs that have been filmed. And then there's also duplicates of songs that we might have played at other concerts that were filmed. So
Yeah.
that's a lot. There's probably 150 songs total, something like that. But in terms of stuff that's unique to different shows that wasn't
Yeah.
recorded from other things, I really tried to make sure I could capture as much stuff that didn't have all the repeats in the set list. So I have quite a big library of stuff that I plan to be able to get out there, but it's really just me doing this stuff. You know, I don't have a team of people, so there's not that many, you know, moments for me to get it all together and get it organized. So recently I've been going through hard drives. I've got boxes and stacks of all this stuff. So, uh, you know, I probably will need to get an intern or two and get some help to get once the studio is able to really be functional,
Yeah.
um, because there's so much I want to be able to do, but I just don't have enough time in the day to do it all.
I can't imagine. And the fact is, like, and with this whole thing, I just want to say on a note, your band, and I've never seen you complain, and none of the bands, all you guys are working bands, don't complain about it. Everything you guys put into it. But I, as a fan, and I wanted to say something like to all the other fans, because I don't think everyone gets it. They think they're like, oh, they're on a bus to get this, the $40 shirts. And I say that because I've heard people say that actually. And that's what
Yeah.
inspired this whole big thing of mine, was hearing somebody crank about the shirts. And,
Yeah.
and I just wanted to express how much other stuff is involved into it. It's a full-time job, and then some.
Well, for sure. But in terms of the shirts, people don't understand the pricing for stuff like that. So just as an example, nobody wants to charge tons and tons of money for something. But the reality of being on the road, what happens is a shirt, depending on the design and how you have it printed, how much ink is needed, how many different colors, the actual price of the shirt can, just to manufacture the shirt, can be pretty costly. So if you have a design that has a lot of colors and it's screen printed, you could be looking at $15 or $16 a shirt just to manufacture that shirt. And then you have to be able to buy enough of these things that you hope to sell. You have to pay for somebody to ship that stuff. You have to pay for somebody to sell that stuff. You have to pay the venue 20 to 30% on every shirt. So, you know, suddenly a shirt that costs you $16 to make, and then all these other expenses that go with it, you're in that $20 range before you could even see making a dime on the thing. So that's why shirts end up being 30, 40, or $50, because you have all these other costs that eat everything up before you get there. There's no venue in the world that doesn't take a cut of you
That is the
selling a
worst.
CD or selling a t-shirt or a poster or whatever. So you always are giving away a percentage of stuff. Artists are always having somebody reach into their pocket, and that's really, it's always been the case. So people don't necessarily know the inner workings of that stuff. So I can see how they would be frustrated thinking, oh, wow, that shirt is probably not worth $40 or $50.
Right.
You know, and they might want to try to find it online somewhere else. But the thing about it is, it really comes down to, how do you bring all this stuff with you that, you know, if you have a trailer and you've got boxes of all this stuff and all this gear, all this weight that you're dragging around, that causes more fuel to be consumed. And a bus, just every day, just to have a bus, just a basic bus, not even a great bus, is at least $1,000 a day. And you have other expenses on top of that. So, you know, it's not something that is easy to do by any stretch. And there are lots of ways where you have to make it as streamlined as you can just to be able to stay out there. So, you know, sometimes you might play 4 or 5 shows just to be able to get from one place to another. And you might just barely be covering expenses for those days till you get to the next bigger show where you can actually start to maybe put some money in your pocket. So it's not like you just are, you know, making this grand living from city to city. It really is pretty tricky, especially if you have crazy drives. Now, routing of tours can be convenient or inconvenient. It really depends on the time and season and availability and all that stuff. So you might have certain times where you have a 12-hour drive one day, a 9-hour drive the next day, you know, and the long drives over and over, going to all these different places. So it's not an easy thing to do. But again, we love playing the music. And when people come there to the shows, we know that they're coming hoping to have a good time, and they don't
Right.
want to see people having a bad attitude. The people that are not in the band anymore are not in the band because they had bad attitudes over a period of time. You know, the music would suffer because they'd have a bad attitude because of being on the road and being in confined spaces and all these things, you
It's
know?
hard.
Yeah, if you have a musician that comes to you and says, "Hey, you know, I don't want to leave the venue at this hour because I need more time to party." Like, okay, first of all, don't use the word party as a verb to
Don't
me.
air quote. Don't air quote.
Yeah. But the thing is, you're not here to party. You're here to play music, and the tour has a schedule, and we're not waiting around longer for you to party. uh, we're going. So you're on the bus, or you're making your own way to the venue, or you're fired, you know? So that's the stuff that, you know, eventually starts happening in bands. And you have people who start doing things like that. And my dad had that kind of stuff happen all the time. And he had a phrase that was a very well-known phrase, which was window or aisle. How would you like to go home because you're fired, you know? So it's like, that's the kind of thing. You know, I didn't ever have to do that in the middle of a tour, but my dad did. My dad had to send people home before.
Which I mean may sound great for people, but once again, from the outside, and that's why it's important to understand. Just so many more pieces to this, and I thought everybody, a lot more people knew all the extra pieces and parts to the tour and the production, and how much it costs, and how much time and sleep. So I was surprised myself how little people knew, and how
Yeah.
glamorous they thought it was, and how they thought you guys were just, you know, eating caviar, you know, you know what I'm saying, just like really just living it up, and just you're driving to town, you know how great it was, and how much profit you're making. I'm like, no, there's so much more to this. There's so much more,
Yeah.
you know. But and so hearing that just was really irritating. To that, the
Well,
people need to know there's more to the job, and there's, you know, it
and
shows more to what you do.
it really does depend, because there are some bands that do have exceptional lifestyles and making tons of money doing all that stuff. But
Oh,
I
there's
think,
10 of them nowadays, right? There's like 10, right? In Rolling Stones, maybe Aerosmith. I mean, there's
yeah,
a few bands that can really get that luxurious.
yeah. So, I mean, it's more often than not that a lot of bands struggle just to be able to afford to be on a bus. There's a lot of bands that do their own driving and are in a Sprinter van where they can't even lay down in a bunk, you know? So and it used to be a lot harder back in the 50s and 60s before they even had buses that had bunks. People would have to sleep in just like on a regular school bus, you know, sitting. They may try to lie down across some seats with stuff in between. I mean, it was not easy. It got a little easier when they created tour buses with bunks and things like that. But on our bus, there's 12 bunks and there's 11 people. So it's like this is, you know, band and crew, one bus, towing a trailer. And, you know, that's the madness. Now,
That's pretty crowded.
everybody, when you get back into it and people are going to be concerned about COVID and anything else, you know, you're in a confined space. So it's pretty nuts.
It's insane. I couldn't even imagine. So is your 12th bunk the junk bunk, or do you guys just fight over that one for
Well,
extra
yeah,
stuff?
it definitely becomes a junk bunk.
I couldn't even imagine sleeping those. They're like little coffins. I see those. I'm like, there's so many. I couldn't tour. I couldn't do it. I couldn't.
Well, you know, it's funny. Once you get used to it, you start having trouble sleeping in a hotel. If
Oh,
you have a hotel room for one night, you a lot of times you end up just going back to the bus, and you go like, because if the bus is leaving at 9 in the morning,
right.
you stay in your hotel room for however many hours, but maybe get on the bus at midnight or 1 in the morning, and you sleep while the bus is driving to the next place. Uh, uh, so it ends up being, you are more comfortable because of the motion and all this stuff,
Yeah.
because
Okay. Yeah.
day in and day out, that is what you are used to, more than being in a quiet bunk or in a quiet bed in a hotel room. So it really is weird. And I've had lots of different experiences with different tours. The Hendrix tour, which was a lot of fun to do, they would have hotel rooms every night. So you would have a drive, and it might only be sometimes 2 3 hours, or sometimes it might be 6 hours, but you'd get off and you'd have broken sleep, go in, and then you'd have to try to transfer from the bus to the hotel to sleep, and then have to get up at noon and then get back and go to the venue. So that became almost more difficult than just staying on the bus,
That's
even though
crazy.
it's
I'm
awesome to
surprised.
have a
You guys
hotel.
were all friends anyhow. I don't know why you guys just didn't do the normal band thing and just stay on the bus. I mean, it's like you guys are all frat brothers anyhow. On
Well,
those
it's
things.
logistics, it's like the bus can't stay at the hotel sometimes, so
Uh,
you got to drop everybody off, and a lot of times people like having a hotel and a shower and not have to shower at the venue and all that kind of stuff. So it's for me, it's, I just go where I'm told to go. I just put your head down and just do it.
well, that's why you're so well respected, and you have a legion of loyal fans, and that's why we've
Well,
been following you forever.
I appreciate it. I do what I can, but it's like it's all part of the human condition. We're trying to make people happy by providing some entertainment. We work hard to do it. It takes a lot of time and effort to learn this stuff and bring the details out. But when it comes down to it, all we can do is just do our best. And every day is a new day, and it's the same thing. We have the same opportunity every day. Do your best.
It is, and so actually, as we get to the end of this piece, with COVID and with things going on, there's a lot less things going on. So hopefully we'll do some more shows. Maybe our next episode we can talk about confessions and break down some more of your stuff,
Sure.
and keep some more content and connecting with the fans in this lull
Well,
of performances.
what's great is that, uh, as we've talked about, there's only so many hours in the day. And
Mhm.
you had contacted me and said, "Hey, I realize that you're busy, but I'm not seeing that much content on your site as much as I would like to see.
How
So
selfish of
yeah,
me.
yeah,
After all you said that.
yeah. So you said, so what if I, from time to time, reach out to you and have this conversation and we talk about stuff?" And I said, "Wow, I'm thankful that you would even consider doing that." So to me, that's a great opportunity to be able to maybe unravel some stories that people haven't heard before, but get to the details of some things. But it's a great chance to do it where I don't have to edit it all myself and all these things. So I appreciate you reaching out, and I think it'll be fun. Hopefully, other people will enjoy the chance to hear some of these stories, and maybe we'll uncover some things that I've even forgot about or whatever. It'll be good to relive some of these things. I haven't thought about the confessions record in a long time. So when we get to that next time, we'll see what
I'm really looking forward to it because I'm chomping at the bit. It's a rock record, and there's just we will jump into it. I have so many questions for you. So
perfect.
I want to thank you for doing this, man. We
Thank
will see
you.
everybody next time. Thank you.
Sounds good.